everybody, and welcome to the Heavy Mind podcast. I'm Teddy Osuna, and today I'm joined with LJ Lumpkin. I'll let him go ahead and introduce himself and what he does, because his story is great, and he's helped me a lot through my weight loss journey, not only with weight loss, but actually my mental health transformation. And I'm going to let him go ahead and get into that.
Yeah, thank you, man. So my name's LJ Lumpkin. I'm the CEO and owner of Nomad Healing Practices. I'm a licensed LMFT, licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm also, my focus is trauma, anxiety disorders, and I work with a lot of athletes, first responders, military. Over the years, I have about 12 years experience in mental health. I was a D1 athlete before then, and dealt with my own mental health issues and pieces of trying to put the puzzle back together and create my best self. I do psychedelic assisted therapy as well, and I've been involved with some of the research programs that have been coming out. And yeah, like mind, body, and spirit, those are three things that I'm really focused on in what I do with my clients and in my practice.
Yeah, man. Like I said, he's helped me a lot. I've had a few therapy sessions with him. A lot of people, when they start a weight loss journey, they think it's just about losing the weight. And you don't really realize how much your mental battles go into when you're actually losing the weight. He helped me kind of overcome certain barriers that I was having. Even still now, I still have some like body dysmorphia that I know I need to get out of my head. Because when you do go through a weight loss like I did, there's a lot of things that are still lingering. And I feel like it fucks with your head to the point where it's like, am I really doing something of value, right? Yeah. And that's where I came to the point where I was like, man, I feel like I'm doing nothing. And then I would go to you and you're like, no, like you're killing it. You're working out, you're doing this, you're doing that, you're doing the bodybuilding show. And I'm just like, yeah, but it feels like I'm doing nothing at the same time. Yeah. And overcoming that and realizing how far I came and how much I changed from who I used to be, you helped me come out on the other side where I was like, oh man, that's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
What made you kind of go into this realm of therapy? Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, my whole life I was surrounded by athletes and military, and like, you know, most of my family members, a lot of my cousins and everything were military. So it's like everybody was active all the time. Mm-hmm. And it was, even for me, when I was done with sports, that's where like anxiety and stress and just feeling overwhelmed started to really take place. Like I could put aside my anxieties because I was going to go run like 10 miles that day, or I was going to be lifting. So it was just like you work it out. And I really started to notice that piece of like when our body and our mind are disconnected, and we're just like grinding. And like if you have that kind of mindset of like work ethic and core building yourself up, there's a lot of pressure you put on yourself. Yeah. And I would see that with other athletes, you know, where sometimes substances would become such a big issue. Okay. Or you learned how to, you know, make yourself about 200 pounds. And then, well, what do you do when you're not running that much, when you're not doing all those things? So it naturally kind of connected with everything that, like, I found of value. Like, sports was the way I got out of my area, the thing that kept me grounded. When I could have went left and probably gotten into more trouble, it was what pulled me to the right and really kept me moving forward. So it was like I had some really good mentors that really focused on my mental well-being. Okay. And I think that was the driving force for me. Like psychology, like is the study of why do people do what they do. Mm-hmm. And so if you can stay curious rather than judgmental, then you start to understand yourself, you start to understand your systems. And I think that was something that always intrigued me. Mm-hmm. You know, we're so driven by our family systems, those core people. And so for me, it was like, okay, well, how do I help others from my community actually start this part of the process? Because the physical part, we can do that a lot of times. But like you said, is when you have this massive change happen, how do you accept who you are? How do you let go of the guilt that you're going to need to continue to train, continue to do the work? Yeah. Right? I'm still, going through it, And then how do you even have those conversations with family members who might not see that point?
Yeah, like since I come from a Latin household, obviously. How would you go about having that conversation with a Latin family or just your family in general? Like, hey, I'm no longer eating this way, or I'm no longer doing the things that we're accustomed to, right? Because even for me, my mom, when I was like, I can't eat that anymore, she kind of took it as a sign of disrespect. It was like, well, you can't eat what I make you. It's like, it's not that I don't want to.
Yeah.
I'm changing my habits for a healthier self, like a healthier self, right?
Right.
And a lot of times, family will be the first to kind of literally take that as a sign of disrespect. And it's like, it's not a sign of disrespect.
Yeah.
It's more of a sign of I'm respecting myself. And these are the new boundaries that I'm drawing in the sand.
Right.
And unfortunately, you don't understand.
Right. And you see, that's so hard. You like that piece of respect. I come from, I'm half black, half Mexican.
Okay,
so
yeah.
So I feel that. And what I tell a lot of people, even when they're working on this, is like the way that we receive love is usually from the food that we eat, right?
Exactly.
Our elders are the ones that are preparing it. It's traditional. There's so much roots in that system.
Yeah.
You know, being able to have the conversation around like, I want to see you. I want my kids to grow up with their grandparents healthy, you know? And it's not to say like, we got to get rid of everything right away. Cause I think that's the big thing is like, you're disconnecting from the culture, right?
Yeah.
But even like what I noticed when I started doing this with my family and talking about these things is like, okay, like I love to cook. So how do I make my traditional meals that I grew up making like in a healthier way?
Yeah.
How do I do like subtle shifts and then sneak it in there, you know? Like, hey, how do you like the recipe? Oh, good. Well, hey, look, this is, and so you could just talk about it a little bit, because I think that especially, you know, when you do a massive cleanse and change in your system, not everybody's built to do that. Like you're built to do that. You were able to, that mental resilience was there. But again, not everybody in the family system is going to be able to do that. They're going to have to do subtle changes. It might be a year that it's just getting to the gym. It might be the next year where they're starting to eat a little healthier.
Okay, with someone like myself who I got to a breaking point. Now there's tons of people who are at that point, but they're not necessarily at the breaking point. What would you recommend for those people that want to take that next step, but they're so afraid to take it because they're just like, I don't know what comes on the other side, right?
Yeah. No. And I bug everybody about journaling.
Yeah.
Like journaling is a big thing. It's a big part of the process. But being able to write down what are the pros and what are the cons.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times what's holding us back from actually engaging with that new process is like, the fear, we don't know what it's going to be like when we're that person. And then also, what are those aspects that we're going to lose? Like drinking every other night, you might lose that social engagement, right? Eating some of the foods that you eat, like, maybe that was a tradition every weekend, right? And so like when you can recognize what you're losing and then really notice what are you gaining and then how do you replace some of those losses with something else? Yeah. That can be a way of just grounding yourself in the process, because I think that that's the biggest part is like, if you're just looking like, oh God, I can't eat that, I can't eat this. Like that's terrible. That does not feel like living, right?
No, yeah. And then going back to what you said about losing that social aspect of drinking, right? I kind of feel like the gym kind of can become the social aspect for you if you do it the right way. Obviously, a lot of people don't want to just do the gym. You can go out to run clubs like you do also. You do jujitsu. Yeah. All those things can become your social life.
Right.
Something that you taught me was, or that you kind of implemented is like, who you surround yourself with is who you'll become, right? Yeah. And like, I'm pretty sure you surround yourself with a lot of people who are in jiu-jitsu or a lot of therapists or things of that nature. Yeah. And it may be hard at first because you don't know that crowd of people. But once you break out of what you're used to, it's like, oh shit, there's a whole different world around me. Yeah. And that's what I learned about myself, because I thought, oh man, if I do this, I'm going to lose all my friends. Yeah, I'm going to lose them. The ones who want to be lost or the ones who want to stick to doing the same thing. But then I've also gained so many other people that have earned my respect and I've learned their respect, where it's like, dude, you've done that. Like, let's go further.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. And I love that you said that too, because it is that acceptance. Like, I do tell people this, and I really accept it. Like, this is a journey of loss. Like, we're going to lose things along the way. You can think of the sweatshirts you lost, think of those friends that you had in kindergarten, right? Like, as we go further in our life, we're going to lose pieces. But then again, that opens up space for new aspects, new energy, new connections. And when you start modeling a behavior, the people that might not be ready to ride with you right now, they might hit you up in 6 months or a year. And I'm sure you're getting those messages from people like, yo, what did you do? Like, put me on game. Like, that I think was really helpful. Like, before I started doing my Mindful Mondays, I was in a silo, like, we don't do therapy in our cultures. Like, we don't talk about feelings.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And then when I started talking about what I was learning about meditation and breathing and really starting to do those core basics, it was cool because I started getting people reaching out like, hey, like when you talk about this stuff, it's almost like I'm able to snap out of it. I can notice. And not everybody's going to be able to go to therapy. Not everybody's going to be able to like pay for a trainer. But it's like, if you have some core basics that you can pass on to someone else, they start implementing them, and it's pretty cool to see.
Yeah, and it's funny you said you bring up that people hit you up, because I posted a video on my fitness page, but then I also tagged my photography page because I really liked the way that I edited everything, and I was like, I have to put this out to a bigger audience. And this guy that I had met, I think 4 or 5 years ago when I was bigger, he hit me up and he was like, dude, I had no idea you lost that weight. I've been looking for a trainer, but I've been too intimidated to go to a trainer. Yeah. What have you been doing? And sign me up.
Yeah.
And he's one of my clients now. And it's like, dude, just that one little video, getting that one client was it for me. Like, okay, if I can do this with one person, I just got to do it with the next one and the next one.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, I want a lot of people to be able to understand that it may be hard at first, but once you get the ball rolling, man, you just have to keep it pushing. Just keep going.
Totally, 100.
Yeah.
Like that, like having that measure of authenticity and truth. Like when you can stand on that foundation, it's like you eventually the vibe just brings so many people to you of like, yo, like I feel like I can connect with you. I feel like you can hear me, and let's do this work. And that's the beautiful thing, is like when you can be yourself and people are drawn to you. And I think for so many of us, and we're the same age, where it's like, we were told not to be ourselves.
Exactly, yeah.
Right? Like, you got to silence a lot of those pieces.
And even now, like, I feel like I'm more myself than I've ever been in my life. These past 3 years, I've learned, this is who I actually am. And it's kind of put this burden on my family where, like, even my mom, sometimes she thinks I'm being really rude or really serious. But I'm just speaking my mind. I no longer hold back like I used to when I was a little kid, where it's like, okay, you know what? They're right no matter what. I'm going to be quiet. And it's like, no, that pushback makes people think, oh, he's being a dick. It's like, no, I'm just speaking what I feel is right for me. And that's what sucks a lot of the times. It's like, oh, that dude's being rude. It's like, I know I'm probably not saying it in the nicest way possible, so I could probably rephrase it a little bit. But as far as me being myself, I've never felt more like myself than I do now.
That's great. And I mean, and that's the thing is, right, we can always fine tune how we articulate it. Like I even tell people a lot, like I've been teaching at a university, so I have to talk in front of people, and very like multicultural counseling is not a fun topic to talk about, because there's a lot of things you can mess up on it. But like when you practice the skill of just, giving your truth, and then also knowing that it's not loaded, and like being able to disarm some of those like insecurities that people might feel, or like the things that they may take as an insult, like being able to clarify. I think that's one of those tools that we don't really look at that much, but after a while people start to understand, like, oh, okay, you're just very straightforward about how you communicate. You're not trying to insult me, but that is like the emotional response. So many people have gotten cut off from emotions, and they feel like, oh, I don't like that feeling, I have to avoid it. And so that's why we have so much conflict in communication.
Gotcha. Also, something I realized, I was watching a video one day, and this dude went up to somebody and was like, oh, can I pay for that for you? And the person was kind of put off. And the person who was on the receiving end was like, oh, I didn't expect you to do that. And the guy goes, well, if I would have been rude, would you have expected that? And she goes, yeah, I would have expected that much more. So us being nice to people, or just doing gestures of like, hey, I'll do that for you, it just seems so awkward nowadays. And that's what's crazy. It's like, I'd much rather just be nicer to somebody and treat them the way I want to be treated, instead of just being a jerk. And a lot of times people think like, oh, this dude's just not talking to me because he's a jerk. Like, no, I'm in my head for something, And a lot of, like, even walking through the gym, sometimes I'm like, I have my head down, I'm just like thinking about what I got to do. And I feel like a jerk when I get back here. I'm like, oh, I didn't even say hi to anybody.
Well, and it is like, right, as human beings, we all have like over 60,000 thoughts in a day, right? So it's like, we're all caught up in our own worlds, our own realities. And I think most people get caught up in like, I'm doing something wrong, or I did something, so it's my fault. and that insecurity bleeds into the way we process what other people are thinking about us. And I mean, I felt that too when I'd be like, oh, I got a client in like, 10 minutes. But that piece of like, all right, well, no, like there was no animosity. If anybody has any problems with me, they can always come and approach me.
Yeah.
And I know that like, it's funny, I'm reading this thing with my son about stoicism and just that piece of being able to be alone and being okay with that.
Okay.
I think we're so conditioned to be afraid that we're going to be rejected or pushed away by people, so we act in a different way. But if we were able to just like, no, I know my own vibe, my own energy, I'm okay with someone coming up and approaching, like, and not being in that expectation of how they're supposed to or how they should act. It's like, it makes the conversations a lot smoother.
Every time I talk to you, I'm like, something always comes up, and I'm just like, dude, God, man. But I want to get back to something you said about setting the example for people, because I've had consultations where people come in here. I've had guys my age, a little bit younger, whatever. They have kids, right? And it's always, I want to change for my kid. I want to change for my kid. But then when it comes down to it, and I'm like, all right, let's sign you up. Let's get this done. They're like, I can't.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, why can't you? And they're always, it's the money, or it's the wife won't let me, or this. It's some excuse, but it's like, but you'll do everything you want for your kid, but you won't do this one thing.
Right.
Why is there always that one barrier for people?
Because it's the loving self part. And people don't recognize that you'll do 1,000 things for everyone else, but you won't do that one thing for yourself that you know you need. And it does a lot of time come from that piece of like, is it okay to love yourself? Is it okay to give yourself nourishment and what you need? Because truthfully, if you do that, you're going to be able to lift more. You're going to be able to do more for others. Yeah. But we've kind of caught it up of like, no, my needs need to go dead last, and I'm going to use whatever money left over. Like, jiu-jitsu has been that for me in a lot of ways, because it's like, I need to compete, and I put that aside for a lot of years. When I was done with track, I was like, no, I'm not competing anymore in anything. But that's a necessity for me, and I don't do that at work. I don't do that with the people I'm counseling, I'm supporting. So it's like this thing I needed to do. My son was doing jiu-jitsu, and watching him do it and watching him have to learn and be in the beginner's mind, it really was just like, yo, I want to do this again. And there was a piece of it where I wanted to do it so I could show this is what it looks like to drive yourself in a competition. This is what it's like to train. And that was one way of doing it, but it didn't give, like, I wasn't showing up every day. It was when I fell in love with it, I was like, you know what? No, I really like this thing. I like learning a new move. I like the technique. I like the chess game. And I started falling in love with it. And my son took a break for like a year where he wasn't doing it. And it was me going to the competitions, me doing it, not for him, but really for me, because I needed to prove I can still compete. Yeah. And that has driven our relationship closer together, where it's like, when he has basketball, when he has anything, we're practicing and talking about things, right? And he came back into it and pushing himself. Yeah. My thing with that is, like, I don't need my kids to be the premier athletes or anything like that. For me, I know that that's what kept me out of trouble. That's what kept my mind sound for a lot of years, because I was always training. Yeah. And I just know the longevity of it is like, this is a vessel. Like, if we're going to use this vessel for the time we have, like, make it a Ferrari. Don't make it a beater,
Damn,
right?
Yeah. No, yeah.
And so that's something that it was modeled to me. And I noticed that's what I would do. I would listen to the people where I saw them, oh, you're practicing this. You're doing this. If you lose, you're not like throwing a tantrum. You're like, okay, bet. I'm going to go back and figure it out again. I'm going to train more. Yeah. And so I can talk about it all day, like, especially as a therapist. I can talk about a lot of this stuff, but my kids won't listen to me. Yeah,
you have to put it in action, right?
You got to put it in action. Yeah. And I think that, for guys that are on the fence, men and women, like everybody, if you notice that you're making an excuse because the money piece or the time piece, you're never going to have time. You have to make the time. Yeah. That's an investment in self. Yep. If you're willing to invest in shoes, if you're willing to invest in, things that are going to deteriorate, invest in the thing that's going to get you farthest, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because a lot of people, there's a few people that I've seen come in and they'll ask about that and then they don't do it, right? But then I'll see their stories on Instagram. What are they doing? They're out drinking. They're out partying. They're out doing this. And it's like you said, your body's a Ferrari. Treat it like that. Why would you treat it like trash?
Right.
You know, like that's ultimately how you feel every day is how you treat yourself every day.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't understand that. And I wanted to get back to something you said, the beginner's mindset, right? Because a lot of people, they're scared of that.
Yeah.
Starting something new, that's scary, right?
Right.
How can someone overcome that? I know that's a loaded question, but
I love it. No, these are always good.
Yeah.
One of the things that, you know, first addressing the fear. What are you afraid of? Is it the fear of failing? Is it the fear of success? Because success is, once you're successful, people look at you and you have a standard you got to hit, right?
Yeah.
You know, right?
Yep. Yeah.
So that, like, recognizing what it is that fear is really stemming from.
Okay.
Not judging it, just acknowledging it. And then remembering the first time you listened to music, the first time you had your favorite song, the first time you played a game that you really like, something that you're into, right? And recognizing the insecurities that came from it, recognizing the enjoyment when you started to see some progress, or like you just were in it, like those pieces, like when we can be in beginner's mind, we give ourselves the space to fail. We give ourselves the space to not be the best, which for high achievers, and I work with a lot of high achievers that are like, they've been elite for so many years and so many things, starting a new career, starting a new thing. That's a scary thing when you learn to do something the same way forever, and now you got to do it a different way.
Yeah.
But like just being able to recognize that and honor it and say, okay, I'm going to be in my beginner's mind. And I can honestly say that was my journey with jiu-jitsu. It's like, yo, like you get beat up and people choke you, and then you hug afterwards. You know, like, and that piece was like, that's what I kind of tell myself when I'm going to be in beginner's mind. I'm going to look for the lesson in whatever I'm doing. And so whenever I feel insecure about it, first podcast I ever did, first time I spoke in front of a couple hundred people, it was like, I'm going to be in beginner's mind. I'm going to recognize the things I could adjust, do better, and I'm going to forgive myself in the moment. Because that's the thing that keeps us from coming back, is that we don't forgive ourselves, we judge ourselves, never going back, never going to feel that again, and then the cycle just repeats.
It's always cycles, man. Damn. There was something you were saying, it slipped my mind though, but there's a lot of good stuff that we're talking about, and I'm just like, God damn. Yeah. Okay, here's one. Why do people self-sabotage when they start making progress, and how can they break that cycle?
Yeah. One reason is like you start to not recognize who you are. Like when you're a new person, like this ain't you. Bro, come on, man. Like let's go get some tacos. Let's go have some Corona. Like, right? Like you get called out by people external, but then even that internal piece, right? Like, oh, do I deserve this? Or like, wait a minute, am I just fooling myself? Am I acting like I got it together? I can honestly say one of my biggest things is being a hypocrite.
Okay.
Like that's something I was really afraid of. Like, I don't want to talk on something I'm still struggling, but the truth is, as a human, I'm always going to still be struggling.
That's what I'm scared of when I talk about like weight loss and stuff, and people are like, oh, how do you keep it off? And it's like, these last 2 months, I haven't been eating clean. Since November, I was like, let's go. I'm done with prep. I can eat whatever I want. It's just like, how do I preach health? And I'm over here like not doing the healthiest thing every day. But then it's a balance, right?
Right there. It's a balance.
Yeah.
You know, that piece of, you know, again, recognizing that it's a pendulum. We're going to be at the peak performance all the time. That's unsustainable. You know, like, when we're at the back, we're not going to be there forever. And that's why I tell a lot of people when they're struggling with like mood disorder, depression, anxiety, it's like, this is not going to be forever. We're just afraid it's forever when we stay in that mindset. Same thing when it comes to like the discipline of, you know, like, okay, I can take a day off. And I'm sure you recognize it. Okay, it was holidays. You know, it's like, I know I got to get back onto it. I got to maintain. You set that date. And is that going to be? And when you have that, it's like, okay, we've already set the date. Let's get into that mindset again.
But it's so hard. Like, it's just being in that little aspect of your mind. It's like, okay, not getting too comfortable, because we can also get too comfortable, right? Totally. And we can fall back into our old habits. And keeping that discipline is the hard part for a lot of people, where it's like, okay, perfect example. Everyone always does it when they start the weight loss journey, right? Monday to Friday, perfect. Meals have been on point, everything on point. Friday night comes, I earned it. Let's go have some pizza. Let's go have some beer. That right there is a self-sabotaging thing, right? And that's what we need to get out of. It's like, if you're on this journey, it's every day, not just Monday to Friday.
Right.
It becomes your all the time thing. It's your lifestyle. It's not just like, oh, I'm on a new diet for these few days. It's like, no, how bad do you really want it?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and you see, that's the thing. Like, even I love that you pointed that out, because it's the Friday. Okay, I would ask from the psychological point, like, what is the relationship with those foods or those substances or those things that are like, okay, let's celebrate. Because it doesn't mean you can't celebrate. You made it to Friday. You should celebrate.
Yeah.
But it's like, usually we don't plan out what is that celebration going to look like in the new you, right?
Yeah.
Different. Like, how do you enjoy yourself? How do you go out?
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's where we get caught up. And it's funny. My mom said this a long time ago. It's like, you can change, but if you keep going to the same club, same place, you're going to get in that fight. You're going to get it, but it doesn't mean you have to get rid of everybody around you, but it's like having a plan. Just like if you go into the gym and you don't know what you're going to be lifting on, you don't know what you're focused on, that's a recipe for chaos, right? Yep. That's how you get injured. But then it's like, okay, I know I'm doing legs today. These are the 6 exercises, right? Like, when you have some planning, and it will feel tedious and unorganized, but again, it's new. And I think that's something that we have to fall in love with when we're on these journeys, is that the newness can feel scary, but we're supposed to be feeling stuff. Yeah. We're live, right? Like, in that feeling, that visceral experience.
So pretty much fear is a good thing if you're starting something new. Like, don't run away from the fear. Kind of just
be curious, lean into it. Yeah, because it stems somewhere.
Also, something I want to touch on that, because before I started the weight loss journey, I know for sure, and I said this in the post that I did yesterday, where it was like, I was depressed, anxiety ridden, just everything about me was just bad, right? Everything that I put into my body was not giving me a positive result. People who are stuck in that aspect of their life, of just like, they think no matter what I do, like you said, you feel like it's forever, right?
Yeah.
What is one of the best ways for someone to not snap out of it, because it just doesn't happen like that?
Right.
But what would you tell somebody, like, hey, maybe you tried this, or like something?
Yeah. So first, I always start with like what you're saying to yourself, and how you said, like, no matter what I do. As soon as you say that, the mind's already, we can't do it. We're done. So it really is the reframing process.
Yes.
Like, when you notice you're having a lot of negative thoughts, being able to write them out so you can see them, and then reframe that thought of like, okay, what is the positive of this? Or can I give 2 positive, or 2 different ways I haven't looked at it before? Because the issue is that we're conditioned to look in the same way over and over again. And so that's why we're bad, we're terrible. Like, we've been saying it for so long. It's the same way. But then it's like, oh, if we have a proper adjustment, or we shift things a little bit, like, even like, what would my best friend tell me? How would my best friend phrase this? If I needed to get better, like, how would they talk to me about it? No, some of us, and I have my friends who say some hard stuff, but those hard truths, sometimes it's easier for us to take them from someone else's voice versus our own.
Okay.
Our own is usually the most critical.
Yeah.
And so that becomes the piece of just like, okay, this is how I'm talking to myself. If I can start saying one positive thing a day, one thing I did well, one thing I'm growing in, you start to create a framework. And like, even like mirror talk, being able to look yourself in the mirror and say it and see that, oh, I don't believe this. I can see my facial expression. I don't believe what I'm saying. But then the practice of doing it over and over again, and that's really what it is. It's like, when we condition ourselves to do something, we have been programmed for so long that we don't realize that code, that running system has been there. It will take some time to get rid of that system. Okay. It will take some evidence to show that system doesn't make sense anymore.
Yeah, that's for sure. Because I know for me, there's so many times that I would just talk to myself, and I go, I would not talk to anybody else like this. Right. And it's just so crazy how much you put yourself down and you don't even realize it. And it's just, like you said, reframing that. And I was doing something in here the other day, and I caught myself saying, oh, I just suck at this. And I go, no, I don't suck at it. I just haven't practiced it enough. Boom. And having that little reset, or that mind shift thing about everything, Carlos was like, see, that right there, that's you showing progress towards something. Yep. I never saw it that way. Right. Because now I see things in such a different light, where I'm like, oh, damn, those little differences make such a huge difference in your life, right? Yeah. Where even my daughter, the other day, she was talking to me about something, and she goes, I just feel like I can talk to you so much better now. Before, it was so much harder. You would just get so angry. It's like, yeah, now I can take a deep breath and just like let it in.
Yeah.
Okay, this is what it is. Cool. It may not be the perfect answer or the right answer, but at least we can get to an agreement or an understanding.
Right.
And that's hard with kids, especially teenage kids, because there's like, oh, as soon as you tell your dad or mom something, it's like they're going to push back.
Right.
Instead of like, okay, how can I take this in and help them?
Yeah.
And not be afraid to come and tell me about stuff.
Truth.
Yeah.
Truth. Because that's the biggest thing you want, right? Is like when they're becoming an adult and they're trying to sort through all these things.
Yeah.
You don't want them just like, okay, I'm just going to go to my friends and talk about it. Like you want them to feel safe to talk with
Exactly.
you. So it's removing the reactivity. And my kids are younger than yours, so like hats off to you. Like you doing it.
Yeah,
like,
it's rough.
But that piece of like noticing, like, oh, why am I so reactive to this? And a lot of times it's like, yeah, like those are our kids.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that we're wanting to pass on the best parts of self.
Yep.
They're picking up all parts of self.
Yeah.
Right?
They pick up everything. Yeah. And something that you helped me realize about myself was when my daughter turned 17. I didn't even know that this was a thing. Like when she turned 17, I had this like mental breakdown, right? Because in my head, I didn't realize this until you told me. You're like, you went back to being a 17-year-old because you hadn't gone past that moment because that's when you had her, right? So when I realized that and I thought within myself, oh my God, I'm not 17, I'm 35. The time is like, there's 17 years of growth that has happened.
Yeah.
How do I teach her those things?
Yeah.
And that's when I sat back and I go, I really need to change who the fuck I am. Not in a bad way, because I'm not a bad person, but everything I say about myself, like when you, like you said, like you reframe everything, you talk good about yourself. I was like, oh man, I really haven't been doing that. And then being able to talk to my daughter about it, like, and apologizing to her, because I had like this big breakdown where I like yelled and I just was not myself. And seeing that within myself and taking the time, like, hey, I'm sorry. I was not there mentally where I should have been. And her realizing, like, oh, even my dad would make a mistake, right?
Boom. That's huge, right? Because how many of us actually had a, and this isn't just like gentle parenting. I'm not like pushing that. What I like the piece about, have you seen an adult apologize to you when you were younger?
Not really.
And so then it's like our mindset becomes, well, as an adult, I need to know everything. And I better be on point. I better have everything together. I can't make mistakes.
Yeah.
That's not real, right? And that reality, I think a lot of people are plagued by. I talk with a lot of parents where they feel so overwhelmed because they feel like they're just failing. It's like, nah, like your kid's not supposed to like you all the time. They're not supposed to be your best friend, you know, like those things. You know, like again, we didn't get to talk with our parents about it in a lot of ways. Like I find it's really rewarding now talking with my parents and asking them questions about what was going on during this time, because you know, those stressors, like everybody acts a certain way when they're stressed or there's anxiety. But again, if culturally we weren't allowed to talk about feelings, you don't know what they were going through. And sometimes that humanizing of them can allow you to be the best parent, the best person, because
going back to even like seeing photos of there's my mom and I were going through some photos a while back, and there was a photo of me sitting on her lap. And it was a Christmas party, and I'm, you know, a kid, 2-3 years old or whatever, and I see it. I'm like, oh, that's a great photo. I hadn't seen it in years. And my mom goes, yeah, I was going through hell at the time. And I go, what do you mean? And I asked her about it, like you said, and in her mind, what she remembers is working her full shift, coming home, having 20 minutes to be home, getting ready, being at the party for like a little bit of time, and then having to leave for another shift. And her having that 20-minute window of being able to sit down, take the photo, enjoy that little bit of time that she had with me. And I go, damn, really? And you don't realize everything your parents are going through when you're that age. So realizing, like, damn, they really went through it.
Right. The shift between them being objects and them being humans. Right? Like that, I think that's huge, because then we give ourselves a little bit of grace, because it's like, okay, if I can understand that about my parents, if I communicate a little bit better with my kids, they're going to understand that about me. Like, I'm human. I'm going to mess up. It's okay to mess up as long as you can, you know, own that. You know, as long as you can speak to what's going on, what you need to fix. You start to build resilient people.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I think that's the big thing right now, especially around, there's so many different parenting styles, but like that aspect of like, how do you continue to hold your culture to be sacred, but then also, you know, continue to evolve, you know, like we're dealing with that now with kids.
There's so many things, man. It's crazy. Even there's something that I realized that I had done after you and I had spoke one time. It was I didn't grow up with my dad. I didn't meet him until I was 10. Long story short, he tried to come back into my life. And when he tried to come back in, I would ask him like, hey, you can call me whenever you want. I don't mind you trying to talk to me or whatever. And I would call him sometimes and I'm like, hey dad, how you been? And whatever. And he's like, his answer was always the same thing. I don't want to bother you. I don't want to bother you. Every time I would talk to him, right?
Yeah.
And I'd reiterate, you don't bother me. I just want to see how you're doing. I want, you know, vice versa. And then he passed. And then I didn't realize this until I had started losing weight. I was doing that to friends of mine when I started going somewhere like, oh, I hadn't talked to you because I didn't want to bother you.
Right.
And their answer was like, dude, what do you mean bother me? Right. And then I kept saying it. And then one day it clicked.
Yeah.
And I go, oh, damn. I'm saying everything he used to say.
Right.
Why? And then as soon as I kind of put that into my mind, I go, okay, I can't keep doing that if I want a different result.
Right.
So now whenever I think of somebody and I haven't talked to them all the time, the first thing I'll instantly just text them. Yeah. Because a lot of times they'll text back, like, oh, I was just thinking about you.
See? Yeah, your intuition starts working the right way.
Yeah.
You know, like that, again, that storyline that we tell ourselves. And I think it's tied to so much of like the issues around depression and all that stuff is like, that if we've been telling ourselves that we're bad, that we're lazy, that people don't want to be around us, then that's our reality. You're going to have to constantly reality test that. And then people get burnt out saying like, yo, no, we like having you around.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
I think there's something to be said about like internal validation and external validation. And I think that's something, it's okay to have one that you lean a little bit more on, like the internal, like, you know, things from within, just the go-getter that's always there, or the external, like you like that medal, you like a coach telling you good job, but you have to have the balance. Yeah. And I think that sometimes if we are internally motivated, that intrusive thought and that negative thinker, the one that's trying to form a diamond, can be really abusive. Okay. You know? And so like when we recognize that in ourselves, it's like, oh yeah, like, wait, can I show myself some love? Can I give some positivity? Especially when you're on a journey, whatever that is.
Yeah. There's so many journeys out there. Yeah. But even for me, when I was done with the show in November, I go, I'm going to stay lean. There's no way. Yeah. You have to learn, like, okay, you can't be at 4% body fat your whole life.
You'll get sick a lot of times.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Yeah. So it's just like having that balance, again, finding of like, okay, I can enjoy my life, but also there's that fine line of like falling back or just walking it and then like, hey, I'm okay. Yeah. Like you said, taking that time off to rest with the family or, you know, right. But it's so hard for a lot of people. They're stuck in that mindset of like, go. Right. That they don't know how to sit back like, okay, I've done enough for right now. Right. How can I relax?
Yeah. The resting thing is huge. And it's like, I think people are more aware of it now that it's like, oh yeah, we do regenerate when we rest. When we sleep. People know that, but still it's that we got to keep going, keep grinding. And I mean, I've seen that in the different training styles. Like, you know, each type of sport you play, each type of competition you're in, there's a different type of training. Oh, yeah. And so you recognize, okay, how do I train in this way? And we can adjust and adapt to it, but there's seasons of it for every type of training. There's always seasons where it's like, okay, there's a rest time, there's a grind time, there's just like, let's iron out all those, like those little things, the little details. If we don't respect that in ourselves and actually learn our own seasons, like that's where we break down. And I see a lot of people where they're just trying to go maximum effort all the time. Yeah. And it's like they burn out and they're not understanding that, that you're going to get to that low point at some point.
That was me from January last year to July when I won the first show. My mind was just go, right? And when I came back, I reevaluated everything, and I thought about the time when we were in Texas, and I realized I didn't really get to enjoy it because my mind was so hyper fixated on this one thing, achieving one thing, right? I didn't enjoy my time out there. I I don't really remember what emotions I was feeling, what all these other things. I remember the moment I won, but everything else outside of it, I don't remember. So when we went back in November, I was so much more relaxed. I didn't care if I won. I didn't care what placing I had gotten. The fact that I got there again to step on the stage, that to me was like, holy shit, I did it again. And me losing, I felt like was a much better outcome for me than me actually winning.
Interesting, yeah. Why do you say that? Why do you say that?
I just felt like I had learned who I was within that time frame. Of my goal isn't to be a competitive bodybuilder. That's going to take way too long, way too much food, way too many drugs that I don't want to take, all this other stuff, right? What I've accomplished now is great for who I am or who I used to be, right? Because if the old Teddy were to look at me now, I know for a fact he'd be like, oh shit, dude, you did that. And that's choking me up because like I didn't ever really look at myself in that mindset when I was that lean. And now I look back at the photos of before we got out there in July and I was like, holy crap, dude, you were lean as shit. But in my head, I kept telling myself I was fat. I didn't get to enjoy those moments of me being lean because 1, the loose skin, 2, I was in my head, 3, I was like, I have to win this. Everything within my soul has to win this. And when I kind of reevaluated everything and I go, I didn't really get to enjoy that. That's kind of lame. I have a medal for it. But the memories, they're not that great.
That's hard. And I really empathize with that because when you're in it, there has to be that focus to get to that point. But that's even what you talked about earlier, like the body dysmorphia piece. Because again, there's the piece that drove you to success and it worked. And that's where it can get kind of tricky. Is like, okay, this thing worked. You saw in November, like, all right, I was able to just relax, which was better for me. And you were able to evaluate, okay, like, wait, this is actually more in line with who I want to be, my goals. If I check back in with old self, we succeeded, right? I think that's kind of the barrier that a lot of people don't have is where they don't go back to their initial intentions of what they were doing. And then it just becomes the driving force, right?
Yeah, that was definitely one thing where I got caught up and I didn't realize how far I had come. In my mind, I was like, I still haven't made it. I don't have anything to show for this. If I don't get this medal, I did this for nothing. And I thought about it after. I was like, no, you've done a lot, man. Like your lowest weight was 168 pounds. From 285, maybe 290 was my heaviest. To get down to 168 pounds. Fuck.
That's huge. That's huge. And to say that you did that, like, but again, like taking it in, I think that's something that like if we like, I don't know how you are with this, but for me, I know like the indulging in like gratification, right? You're like, oh yeah, I'm great, you know. It feels good. I think we're supposed to do that for a moment, right? For a little while. But then we have a snap to moment. If we're afraid of getting caught in that, and I think, right, like especially when it comes to eating, when it comes to food, right, that instant gratification piece, that can be a tricky line to walk, right? Where you're like, okay, well, if I go back to actually loving or taking care of myself or treating myself, then I might slip back. Right?
And like, again, it's that fine line of finding the balance. And it's just like, no, you can still be lean and not be overindulgent, right? It's just now I realize, okay, this is where I'm at and this is where I want to stay. I don't want to be any bigger. I don't want to be any smaller. Right now, I'm happy.
So you're great. And that's the mindfulness piece, right? Being in the present moment. Like a lot of people who are like, like mindfulness, whatever. But we're so caught up in the future all the time. We're so entrenched in the past, right? If we can be present with like, hey, I got my health, I got my relationship with my family, I got all these things going on that I've actually worked towards and I've gotten to this place. Good place. Taking that moment, like right here, this is a good moment. Right
exactly.
Here, right? And when we can take it in versus just like, okay, what's the next thing?
Exactly.
Right? That like we got to bump it off. And I'm guilty of that. I work on that all the time of like, yo, what's going on right here, right now? Like, where are you at? Like, especially as a business owner, as, you know, like I had this moment 2 days ago where I was sitting in a session and like, you know, it was a ketamine session. So I'm sitting while this person is, you know, using ketamine, and it was a moment where, and it was on Martin Luther King Day. So it was like kind of cool where I was just like, yo, like I'm doing exactly what I said I wanted to do like 10 years ago. Like I would love to be supporting people in altered states of consciousness. I think this would be helpful for trauma, for PD, things that were like out of the box, kind of crazy at the time. Yeah. And it's like I'm sitting here doing it. Yeah. And I could be complaining that I'm like working on Martin Luther King Day as everybody else. But I'm like, no. This is what I worked for, right? And so it was like when we have those moments where we're able to just sit and like look at like, yo, I put this down. I wrote this down somewhere. I was going to do it. Yeah. I'm doing it right now.
It's also kind of going back to the whole being in the moment, right? And then going back to the bodybuilding thing. A lot of the times I've seen it right now recently where people are in the bulking phase or in the cutting phase. Why don't you just maintain for a little bit? A lot of there's a few people that I follow on Instagram that have lost weight and they're like, oh, I'm bulking right now because then I want to cut, and then when I cut, they want to bulk. It's this constant cut bulk thing. Yeah. Have you maintained your weight? Have you done that for your mental health, where you can literally just live in your present body and say, I'm happy with what I'm at right now? Yeah. And that's where I feel I'm at right now, where I don't want to bulk, I don't want to cut. Right now, I am who I am, and I'm happy with myself. Yeah. In the 6 months from now, do I want to change? Maybe. But right now, I'm more than happy with who I am. Yeah. It takes a lot of, mental effort to say that. Right. Because a lot of times we can be like, oh, but I hate this about myself. I hate that about myself. Yeah. And I get constantly asked also, do you want skin removal surgery? I do sometimes because of the body dysmorphia. Yeah. But then somebody brought it up yesterday, and like, what about the scars? You're going to have the scars. They're going to remind you about it. Like, oh man, that's kind of true. Yeah. So it's like this again, a balance of like, do I stay with the loose skin or do I deal with the scars? I'd much rather just deal with the loose skin. Yeah, yeah. And that right there is just like, that's your battle wounds. Those are your scars. Right. Yeah. Deal with it.
Yeah. You start to, again, loving all parts of self. Yeah. I think that's a hard one, the loving all parts of, because there's parts that we always want to get rid of. Yeah. There's always something that we can adjust. And I see that as like, that is usually our challenge. Like once we actually can love all parts of, and like you just said, it's like, no, these are my battle scars. Like I know where I came from to get right here. You know?
It's tough though. It's taken me a long time. But one thing I did want to ask you about is therapy and like altered states of mind. How did you get into that, and what realm is that? Because that's, to me, is interesting.
Yeah. So when I was in grad school, my focus at the end was in altered states of consciousness, and working with like PTSD and anxiety and just trauma in general. I was writing stuff on working with veterans around like meditation and breath work, because you can achieve altered states of consciousness through that. Now, psychedelics, LSD, psilocybin, MDMA, and then ketamine is one of the. It's another one that's non-traditional, but it's been approved to use off-label in the United States. Gotcha. MDMA is close to being approved. In some research studies, it's approved. Psilocybin, same thing. But basically, like all traditional culture, like all cultures, had some way of altering their state of consciousness to achieve enlightenment or wisdom or knowledge from their ancestors or higher power, higher self, right?
Like a lot of people, it comes to mind as ayahuasca, right?
Okay. Yeah. Ayahuasca. And so when like you travel into the rainforest to be able to do that, and you're in, Mother Aya, like she's taking care of you, she, and show you a lot of truths. Okay. All these medicines are different, and they work in different ways of healing. Now, I tell everyone this: anything can always be abused and used in a negative way. Yeah. And that's what a lot of the mainstream, in the 60s and 70s were focused on. Is like, oh, these people are, they're thinking differently, or they're, going crazy. It's like, yeah, if you're in an altered state and you're not in a safe environment, that could cause a lot of problems.
Gotcha. Okay.
The link between doing like CAP is ketamine assisted therapy. Yeah. or, you know, like doing psilocybin with a therapist or MDMA assisted therapy, you're in a safe environment where there's not a lot of, you know, stimulus that's going on. There's music playing in the background. You have a trusted counselor, therapist, you know, or healer, you know, that's sitting with you as you're going through this process of, you know, exploring your subconscious mind. Something that I do with a lot of my clients is I give them prep questions before they go in. We do a lot of breath work and just talk about what their intentions are going into the journey, whether it's to work through grief, whether it's self-improvement, whether it's letting, you know, like figuring out like where their next steps are. The journeys can be different, but it's profound what people find when, and, you know, and I am not just, you know, a salesman. I am a member, you know, I got you. I've done my healing work, you know, and I really, when I was in grad school, you couldn't talk about this as much.
Wow.
You know, like, so it's really cool to see that, like, as I've been teaching, you know, students have asked about it, like, you know, what is research showing? And, you know, like with MDMA, they were showing like 60% recidivism rates, which means the symptoms of PTSD were going away after 3 medicine sessions. And you'd have preparation in between. And so, you know, it's one of those things like we know that these medicines help and support, and that it's that relationship that really helps support it. Because someone could have a profound experience, but if you can't have a place to process it, like if you have to go back and talk to your mom about like, this came up, you might get a little bit of shame and judgment. But having someone to really talk about that with, like I've seen amazing results for my clients, but then also for myself, like healing from some of my trauma scars, some of my negative self-talk, and recognizing, oh, wow, like this is really present for me. I think even for me going back into grad school, it was going through an altered state of consciousness of recognizing like what am I even here for? What am I doing? I'm not an athlete anymore. And then noticing like, wow, like I've always had a passion for helping others. I've always had a passion for being able to sit in a room with someone and let them, you know, be in their emotions, be in their feelings, express their stuff that they can't talk about, and then supporting them in the journey of how do they want to rebuild.
That's so crazy, man. I can only imagine. Like, how long does one of those sessions normally last? Or is there?
So psilocybin sessions are usually about 6 hours.
Oh, wow.
Long sessions. CAP sessions are usually about 3. MDMA are around 8. Now, depending on what practitioner you're working with, what research study you might be a part of, it could be different. But each medicine has an active time where it's like you are in that trip, that really hard state, and then there's usually like a gray time after where you can process and talk about what was coming.
Man, I can only imagine what you've experienced in those sessions, man. So many things that life experiences and everything that people have gone through.
Oh yeah. I mean, you know, therapy in itself, like as a therapist, it almost is like being in an altered state of consciousness, because you'll go from hour to hour, and each person has their own energy, their own story, right? So for me, meditation was a huge part of my practice, and like being able to just ground in between and notice, okay, well, now I'm in a new state, a new environment, new energies coming in. So that, like, being in the actual medicine sessions with clients, it's the coolest experience because, like, you know, I get to be a support as, like, because I don't know what's going to happen ever. You know, like I can't tell someone this is how it's going to look.
Exactly. Yeah.
You give some insight, you give them some tools, but then you let them know, hey, I'm going to be here for you. I'm going to be present with you.
That's so crazy.
Yeah.
And then I want to end it on this. Do therapists have therapists?
Yes. Yes, we need them. And you should always ask your therapist, do they have a therapist? You know, we're human and we have a gift to be able to be present. You'll notice sometimes with therapists when they're burnt out and when they don't have that space where they can heal themselves. Sometimes it's a season to have therapy. Other times it's a season to just focus on physical health. Or, you know, we go to other practitioners. We go to Reiki. We go, you know. So I say that because, like, if you're vetting your therapist, and that is important to talk with the person you're going to be seeing about your mental health, but ask them what they do for their healing practices. You know, that's a very neutral way of just saying, like, I want to know you're doing your work too. You know, and usually therapists are open. Some have their different styles.
Yeah.
But I know for me, for the clinicians that work under me at Nomad Healing Practices, we're pretty, you know, transparent about like how do we do our work.
Yeah. And this guy is, from the other therapist that I had before, man, night and day. It was an older gentleman, and I was talking to him, I was like, this guy does not understand what I'm saying. That's just a completely different level. Then when I met you and I saw you working out, I was like, God damn, this dude is, God damn. I was like, he gets it. And so that's kind of where the ball kept rolling, and I was like, just kept seeing you, and I was like, I have to get in there because I know there's some stuff in here that has to get worked out. And I'm glad that I did. And now it's just built even a beautiful friendship, I like to call it, and it's so many things that are coming, and man, I thank you for your time and your energy always brightens me up. Whenever I talk to you, I'm just like, oh man, I feel so much better. And we're not even in a therapy session, this is a podcast, but just know when I come out of therapy with him, I'm like, God damn, I feel so much better. I feel like a weight lifted off my shoulders, you know?
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. And yeah, like there is a piece of the human connection, you know. My style of therapy is really about being a human in the room. And, you know, it's easy when you get to connect with people, you know, because that's a felt sense. And so I just really want to honor your journey and allowing me to talk with you on this stuff, because it's, man, like,
I hope it's not the last time.
Not at all. Not at all. Anytime you want to talk, I'm down to do this.
Yeah.
And like, you know, you're a model of health. So just,
Thank you. It's hard for me to take a compliment, but you know, I have to learn to take them. Yeah, and I know he did it for a reason. So I have to take, and thank you for that, because it truly means a lot. And you seeing different varieties of people and telling me that, I'm just like, okay, I have done something right. Yeah. So where can they find you?
So you can find me at nomadhealingpractices.com. There's also IG, LJ_the Nomad, and Nomad Healing Practices. And you can also on LinkedIn, LJ Lumpkin. Hit me up, DM me. If you're looking for a therapist, mental health coach. If you don't have me, I got my associates. They're ready to go for you, and they're trained in my style.
And you guys know where to find me at Teddy's Fit Journey. And that was the Heavy Mind Podcast. Thank you for watching.